Good evening, thanks for making the effort to come out. John has actually teed things up very nicely for me, because now I'm sure you're all sitting there going, God, this is great, we need to call Hailstorm, need to set up an e-commerce site. But when you start thinking about that, an awful lot of questions come up, because it's not that straightforward, it's not that simple. You can't just set up a website and next thing you know, you've got customers, you've got business, you've got new orders, you're selling to the States. Unfortunately, it's not that straightforward. So what I'm going to take you through in the next few minutes is just to give you a bit of a rough guide about where to start. What are the important things? What do you need to take into consideration when you're thinking about developing an e-commerce strategy? Because essentially, like other parts of your business, you need to start off with a strategy. You can't just start off with actions. You've got to take a bit of a step back and look at, what am I trying to achieve with this? What's the opportunity? Who are my competitors? What are the things that are going to make this a success? So as John mentioned in the introduction, I'm a former global online sales director at Philips. And I'm sure you're all familiar with Philips. It's the company with the TVs and the shavers and all of those kind of things. And when I started working in the area of e-commerce with Philips in around 2008, it wasn't such a sexy topic. At the time, people in Philips were very reluctant to embrace e-commerce. And probably the main reason was it conflicted with their business model. Philips made the vast majority, 95, 96, 98% of its sales through traditional channels. So if somebody was going to buy a Philips product, they would buy it in a DID or Harris City or a Curry's or somewhere like that. So when I came along and said, well, actually, why don't we start selling more online? Why don't we start selling with Amazon? It conflicted with the status quo, because Amazon was aggressive around pricing, around marketing, around positioning of products. So there was an awful lot of uncertainty. And the result of that was online customers were very low on the list of priorities. Online itself was low on the list of priorities. It was less than 3% of sales. And whenever I went into a meeting and started trying to talk about e-commerce, they would say, 3% of our sales, we're not going to waste time on that. Let's talk about the 97%. That's where we make our money. That's where the business is. Fortunately, gradually over time, that started to change. And one of the main tactics that I used to try to convince people about why e-commerce was going to be important for Philips, and this is equally applicable to a smaller business as it was to Philips, my view was, it's about the consumer. The consumer is shopping online. The consumer is researching online. The consumer is active online. So if your consumers or your customers are already there, you need to be there, because the chances are your competition is there. So while people in Philips were saying, we don't want to sell on Amazon, we don't want to sell our TVs on Amazon, we want to sell them in shops. Samsung, LG were very, very aggressive online. So people were going onto Amazon and they were buying competitive products. So ultimately people in Philips reached the decision, yeah, we've got to make a step. We've got to make a change. But it was really a mindset change that was the most important thing. And by the time I left in mid-2012, the situation had reversed completely. But it was really because the mindset had changed and senior management were starting to embrace the idea of online. It was one of the 6 must-do things on the senior management agenda in Philips. Amazon went from being a little bit of a black sheep customer to being Philips' number 2 global customer, ahead of Walmart, behind MediaMarkt, a big German electronic retailer. China had come from absolutely nowhere to being the 3rd biggest online market for Philips. It was greater than 12% of the total sales, and by 2015 it's going to be getting close to 18% of total sales. And probably the most striking thing was it was worth more than $500 million in turnover for Philips. So it became a very, very important part of the overall business. So, there's money to be made in e-commerce. And just to illustrate a little bit, just a few things to kind of trigger things in your mind. It's projected by 2016, 22% of total retail sales in the UK will take place online. And that's total retail, so I'm not talking about concert tickets or airline tickets or hotel booking. This is retail, this is physical goods. It includes grocery, it includes all of those things. And we generally live a little bit in the shadow of the UK, and sometimes things that happen in the UK are kind of mirroring what's going to happen here in a couple of years' time. Something that's very important though about e-commerce is an awful lot of Irish shoppers are shopping on UK websites. Websites like Amazon, like Argos, like ASOS. So an awful lot of Irish retail is captured inside these UK numbers. 20% of UK shoppers this year bought all of their Christmas gifts online. So it was It has been gathering pace, but this year 20% of people bought all of their goods online. 71% of products searched for in Ireland returned only UK-based retailers. So people in Ireland, and this comes up in every survey, people in Ireland want to buy from Irish retailers, be that online or offline. But when people were searching for goods and services in Ireland on google.ie, they were getting UK results. They weren't getting any Irish retailers as part of the results. And another very striking thing, when you look at when you look at global rankings, Amazon is the 11th most popular website in terms of traffic in the world. And again, when you think about that, the really important thing about that is the top ones are things like Google, like Facebook, like Twitter, like YouTube. People are going there to make searches, to be entertained, to upload pictures of their kids and cats doing cute things. People are going to Amazon to buy. So the 11th most busy website in the world is a website where people go to buy. So it really demonstrates, there's an opportunity out there. People are shopping online. They're shopping on Amazon, but they could equally be shopping on your website. This quote from the Digital Hub goes back to the point that I was making earlier on. And I know you shouldn't read from slides, but I'm going to read this out because it's quite important. The Digital Hub has projected that by 2017, the online consumptive economy will be valued at 21 billion in Ireland. If the trend for favouring overseas outlets for online purchase continues, however, the revenue loss to the domestic productive sector will be immense. So an estimate is anywhere between 50 and 75% of Irish online sales are made on UK websites, like the ones I mentioned. So if you think of that, 21 billion is the size of the prize, and anywhere from 50 to 75% of that is being lost to the UK, you can imagine the significant impact that that's having on the economy. And if you look at, main streets of towns and cities that where there's an awful lot of boarded up retail sites, if you look at a lot of the struggles that retail is having at the moment, yeah, part of it is about the recession, but part of it is about the fact that 3 out of 4 maybe of every online sale that's made isn't being made with an Irish retailer. The money isn't staying in Ireland. The money is going abroad, predominantly to UK retail. And then if you look at some other perspectives on retail and on e-commerce, Ben Dunn, who's the kind of a former king of Irish retail, what he's saying about it is, why bother with shops with expensive displays and staff kitted out in uniforms and high-cost refrigeration display units? The current retail model is the most expensive way of doing it. So Ben Dunn, with all his experience, he's looking at retail and he's going, this is expensive, this doesn't make sense. There's an awful lot of frills, there's an awful lot of things that we're currently spending an awful lot of money on that we don't need to spend it on. If we can focus more on really what the consumer is looking for in the online space, we can offer better value to the consumer and we can create more margin for ourselves. So if you cast your minds back, this is what retailing looked like maybe 40, 50 years ago. And the retailer was in control because the retailer determined everything. If you went into the shop and you asked for a loaf of bread, he gave you the bread that he was stocking. If you asked for milk, he gave you the milk. If you asked for frozen pizza, he'd say, you're crazy, it's the 1950s, we haven't got frozen pizza. But it didn't matter because you were captured by that retailer. The retailer determined the price, the range, and everything else connected to the relationship that you had with them, because you weren't going to drive another 4 kilometers down the road to find somewhere that might have it a little bit cheaper. You didn't know if it was going to be cheaper, and chances are you were just going to be in the same situation. What's happened over the last number of years is that there's been a power shift in favour of the shopper, in favour of the consumer. And part of this comes about from selection and range. And this is as applicable to offline as it is in online. People now have these vast, supermarket, hypermarket type operations. You've got out-of-town superstores, all of these kind of things. So you're no longer captured by the local small retailer. You now have all of this vast range of things to look at. Online has come on board. So shoppers now have much more choice. And one of the really important things about online is this idea of perfect information. If you're a consumer, you know what price somebody is charging for the product. You know if you can get that product cheaper from Amazon in the UK. You know if you can buy it cheaper somewhere down the road. So an awful lot of the information power has shifted towards the consumer. And the final thing then is something like mobile and apps, and the fact that interaction between
the retailer and the consumer has changed. You can send information out, you can send promotions, you can send vouchers. So you're constantly in a position where you can start to manage the information that a consumer is getting so that they know more about your offers and your propositions. So all of this should have you thinking, God, online seems to be a great opportunity. What do I need to do? What are the steps? What are the golden rules? And these are 4 steps, and they're not ones that I made up. These are 4 things that Amazon use when they're determining their strategy and when they're putting things forward. The first one is very simple: traffic. How do I get more people onto my website? Content. What happens when they get onto my website? What are they going to do? What are they going to see? Availability. What am I going to sell on my website? Will I sell the same things as in store? Do I have a store? Do I need a store? And then value. Is the consumer getting a good deal? Because ultimately, particularly in the post-recession Ireland, people are interested in getting a good deal. It doesn't mean they're always going to go after the cheapest price, but they don't want to feel like they're getting value. The first and most important one of all these is traffic. Anybody, any idea what this is, or where this is, or why these people are queuing? It's not a Garth Brooks concert. This is Black Friday in the US. So Black Friday is the day after Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is always a Thursday, last Thursday in November. So it's close to Christmas. A lot of people take Friday off. And what do? Of course, they go shopping. So these are the massive queues of people who want to get the deals that they have in Target. It's highly unlikely that you're ever going to be in a position where you have people queuing like this to get into your store. And likewise, it's unlikely you're going to get people queuing to come onto your website. But traffic is the single most important thing when it comes to developing a website. And the vast majority of people who have had dissatisfaction with the website, and the people who probably call John up and say, you know what, I built a website and I'm not a millionaire yet. The primary reason for dissatisfaction is traffic. It's because it's not a question of build it and they will come. You have to give people a reason to come to your website, because you know what? Chances are there's a lot of other websites out there that do something quite similar to what you do. So how are you going to build traffic? How you build it is based upon this purchase funnel. You're probably familiar with the old purchase funnel, the AIDA purchase funnel. This is a slight spin on that. This comes from McKinsey, and they brought it out around 2009. And what they're looking at is, this is how the new consumer operates. You start off with an initial consideration set, you then gain information, you make a purchase, you then go through this post-purchase experience, and you try to create a loyalty loop. And I'll just try to explain a little bit, using an example. If you want to buy a TV, in the past you would go into a shop and you would walk up and you would start looking at a big wall of TVs and they all look the same and none of the pictures are right, and some spotty teenager comes over and says, yeah, that's the best one because it's most expensive, and I buy that one because it's cheap. I get most commission if you buy the other one. So the in-store experience was about your direct interaction with the person in the shop. And it was quite a linear process. You would go in, you would get information. Based upon that information, you would make a decision and the transaction would be complete. What happens now is you go through different phases of what you call active evaluation. So now if you're going to buy a TV, chances are most people will go online. You'll probably start off with a Google search. And then you'll start looking at some various other touch points. Will we send the slides out later on? Anyone? Yeah? So you don't need to worry about trying to read this. You'll get the slides later on. But you'll go through various other touch points. You look at ratings and reviews. What are people saying? Maybe I'll buy this LG TV, but LG, is it as good as a Sony TV? I don't know. So you can find websites with ratings and reviews. You can go to the manufacturer's website to get information. There might be some new technology. Do I want a 3D TV? I don't know. There was a big hype 2 years ago. Do I want to have this? Is it HD ready? What does HD mean? Will my Skybox plug into it? So you go through all of these steps where you're trying to get information. Word of mouth still remains a very important way of getting information. Most people within their network have somebody, a brother-in-law or a cousin, that they'll ask for information about an iPad or a new phone. That all brings you down to this moment of purchase, and that's where the magic happens. One of the big problems that an awful lot of retailers have and an awful lot of businesses have is that you can do everything right along here, you can send out all of the right messages, but when it comes down to a moment of purchase, that's where the rubber hits the road, that's where somebody passes over their credit card details, that's where you make the sale. If it goes wrong here, you could potentially lose that customer forever. And I say forever because particularly now, this loyalty loop is becoming really, really important. If you can get people to buy into your brand, and Apple are fantastic at this. If you've bought an Apple product, they talk about the unpack experience, and when you bring it home and you open the box and everything is nice and smooth and white. So all of those things are building into this loyalty loop, because you don't want your consumers going off, reading reviews, looking at websites, doing all these things. You want them to stay loyal to your brand. So in this post-purchase experience, you're using other tools, you're using your website, you're getting other ratings and reviews, so that your consumer is remaining loyal to you. And if you're looking in the online space, there's an awful lot of ways that you can get traffic coming onto your website. SEO is something that has been mentioned already as being very important for getting traffic. But there can be other things. There can be social media. There can be things like Pinterest, Twitter. You can tweet offers to your customers. You can have a Facebook page. You can have posts talking about your new range, your new stock. There's a company in Clare, a boutique, and they don't have a website as such. They only have a Facebook page, and they do all of their e-commerce transactions through their Facebook page. So it all brings you back to the moment of purchase. If you're an e-commerce retailer, if you're an online trader, having the right experience on your website is crucial, and I'll talk about that a little bit in the next one and some of the other ones. And then maintaining and managing this whole post-purchase experience, because the old adage about it being easier to sell to an existing customer than to acquire new customers is equally, if not more, applicable to online, because there's so many other ways, there's so many other tools that you can keep the conversation going with them. You can get them to post pictures, you can get them to write reviews, you can get them to tell you what they thought of the whole experience. So using all of these various online tools to generate traffic is going to be key, and it's going to be important, and probably the success and failure of your enterprise is going to come down to your ability to manage this and to get traffic. The next thing is, once you get those people onto your website, the next thing is, what are they going to do when they get there? So content is key, and John referred earlier on to Brady's Family Ham, and your initial reaction might be, why does a ham company need a website? Who's going to buy ham online? But it turns out 3,000 people bought it over Christmas. But it's not like books or DVDs or the very obvious things that you will buy online. But for someone like Brady Family Ham, they've got quite a high profile. They've got TV ads, radio ads, they sponsor the Kildare football team. So they have quite a profile, and people will naturally gravitate towards your website. And what they see on your website will really impact on how they perceive your brand. So in this case, you can see that they use their website to tell their story. They use their website to talk about the history, to talk about the brand, Great Taste Awards, Gloss and Heron Awards. So you come away from that website going, yeah, Brady's Family Ham, that's a brand I trust, that's a brand I believe in. And the next time you're in the supermarket, when you're walking along all of the packaged meat section, chances are you're going to pick up some Brady's Family Ham. So having that right kind of content on your website is crucial. And John already answered the question, but would people buy meat online? Yeah, they do, not just from people like Brady's, but there's a website down in Clonmel called James Whelan Butchers, and they're very, very successfully selling meat online. This has been in operation now for about 5 years. It's been profitable from the first year. And what they've done is, they've really focused on what's important to people when they're buying meat online. And the main thing is trust. Because if you're thinking about things that you wouldn't buy online, meat is probably one of the first things that would come into your head. Is it going to be fresh? Is it going to be sitting on my doorstep when I come home with blood dripping out of it? Is it going to be horse meat? Where is it coming from? All of those kind of questions. So if you want to sell something like meat online, it really is about creating that trust in the quality and the values of the people that you're buying from. So their whole website is built around creating this trust. It's got a message here from Pat Whelan. It's got this idea, order today, deliver tomorrow. They talk about their packaging, they talk about the delivery, they talk about the quality. They have an awful lot of information about recipes, about sourcing of the produce, that it all comes from their farm in Tipperary, all of that kind of thing. So again, it's about telling your story so that you create trust with your consumers. The next thing is availability, and these are Garth Brooks, people who got some of the Garth Brooks tickets, and availability is a big, big issue online. Garth Brooks managed to solve it by just having more and more concerts, but it's not always that easy to manage questions around availability. And one of the big questions that everybody needs to have if they're thinking of setting up a website is, what's my USP? Why are people going to come to my website? This is a really good example. This is a company from Northern Ireland called Chain Reaction Cycles. And they claim, whether it's true or not, they claim to be the biggest online bicycle retailer in the world. And if you consider it's a company that started off, it's a family business based in Northern Ireland, and they've become the biggest online bicycle retailer in the world. It's pretty significant. It's a pretty nice message to be able to send out. And what they do, and I recommend if you're looking for a really good example of an e-commerce website, have a look at this one, because literally you can buy anything. And if you look at the navigation here, and the navigation goes way down off the screen, but if you look at the amount of bikes they have, cruisers, mountain bikes, road bikes, BMX bike, kids bikes, basically any type of bike you want, any type of bike accessory you want, you can get it from them. They're a specialist, but they've created this community of people who buy everything from them. They buy all of their accessories, they buy their gear, they buy their brakes. They do everything through Chain Reaction Cycles. So the way they differentiate themselves from competition is saying, we're a specialist. We're specialists in bikes, you can get everything from us. And one of the big advantages and opportunities of online in comparison to offline is you don't have floor space restrictions. You don't have shelf restrictions. You can have everything in your warehouse, or you don't even need to have it in your warehouse. You just need to be able to have it available to order and available to deliver. So if you are developing an e-commerce business, looking at things like the range that you could potentially stock in comparison to your online business can be really important. And this is something that John Lewis do. John Lewis is a UK department store. It would be similar to kind of an Arnott's or maybe a kind of Brown Thomas. And they've managed to create a very, very good online experience to go with their excellent offline experience. So people like to buy stuff from John Lewis. But as I alluded to earlier, you've got floor restrictions and you've got other logistic restrictions around what you can have in your shop. So what John Lewis is saying is, you want to buy a wine cooler, the price of these are €8,500, €8,500, €3,500. So these are very, very expensive, high-end wine coolers. They're not going to stock these in all of the stores. But what they're saying is, you trust John Lewis, you like shopping at John Lewis. These are things that you can't find in store, but we've selected them for you, and you can buy them online. So addressing that availability issue can be really, really important. And then the final thing is value. And value isn't just about price. And in fact, the last thing you want it to be is about price. Because this is a phenomenon here called showrooming, which if you're involved in retail, you're probably going to be familiar with. By the way, the main focus of my presentation is on the retail side of it. We're going to have the next speaker talking much more about B2B, whereas I'm focusing more on the retail side of things. But this phenomenon in retail is showrooming, and showrooming is essentially people are using the technology, they're using the information that they have, again, to empower themselves, to empower the consumer. So if you're selling, in this example, it's TVs. If you're selling a TV in a physical store and the price of the TV is $4.99, and somebody comes up to you and says, I can buy this TV online for $4.59 or $4.49. Will you sell it to me for that price? As a retailer, you're immediately faced with a dilemma. Do you risk losing the sale, or do you reset your price to $4.49? And that's really a call that the retailer has to make depending on the margin and everything else. But what it means is that the retailer is no longer in control of his own pricing. That pricing is being set somewhere else, by somebody else. And that can have a very, very profound impact on your margin performance. So you've got to try to take it away from price. And the way you can do it are some of the things that I mentioned already. It's about creating this element of trust. So using your website and using your brand and using everything that you offer as a company as a selling tool on your website. So this is an example from James Whelan Butchers, and they have a blog. And this blog, in this case, it's called Celebrate the Tomato. So it's about cooking. It's not about meat. It's not about saying this is a nice steak. It's about cooking. It's about lifestyle. It's about talking to people who are interested in food and therefore interested in meat about wider topics. They also have a book out called The Irish Butcher Shop. Other things are butlers have a chocolate experience. So butlers chocolates also have a chocolate experience. And you can get information about that chocolate experience on their website. So again, they're combining their online and offline offerings to create this sort of loyalty. I don't know if any of you had Kyo's crisps. They're kind of handmade artisan crisps from Dublin. One of the things that they do on their website is they've got a field locator. So on the back of every pack, they've got a code. You can type the code in here, and that will tell you what field the potatoes were grown in of the crisps that you're eating. It's nice, it's quirky, it's a little bit of a gimmick, but what it does, it just creates that kind of loyalty because it creates authenticity. You know, people want to buy from what they know. Again, the horse meat scandal made people very, very conscious of where's this meat coming from. But people also want to know where the food is coming from. And what they can do in Kyo's Crisps is they can target it down to the exact field. Another area where you can differentiate around is service. This is something that Amazon do very, very well. And because people have the experience of shopping with someone like Amazon, it set the bar very, very high. People expect if I order it today, it's going to be delivered tomorrow. Or if they say it's going to be delivered next Wednesday, I expect to have it by next Wednesday at the latest. So having very, very good, clear service information, delivery information, returns information, having all of those kind of things in place will create the kind of loyalty that I mentioned earlier on as part of the loyalty loop, so that people will keep on coming back to your store. And you don't just want them buying from you when you're the cheapest, you want them buying from you all of the time. You want them being loyal customers who will come back to you for the quality, for the range, for the service, for all of the things that you would associate with your offline business. So I suppose they're the main topics that I want to talk about, but then if you're starting to think about yourself, and your next steps obviously are to talk to the guys in Hailstorm, but some of the things that you need to think about are, where's my traffic going to come from? You know, what's my strategy that I'm going to use to get people coming onto my website? Is it going to be Google? Is it going to be Facebook? Is it going to be combining my offline activities with my online activities? Is it going to be something else? Then start thinking about content. If people come to my site, will they stay there? Something that you can look at on Google Analytics is your bounce rate. And most websites have a bounce rate of about 60%. So that means 60% of people who land on your website immediately go off it. They take one look at it and they go, no, not for me, and they disappear. So how can you get people to stay on your website? And when they're there, what do they find out about your company? Are you telling your story? Are you building loyalty? Are customers able to find what they want? If they want to find out what field their crisps came from, is it easy for them to do that on their website? Availability can be really, really important because particularly if you're an offline retailer, you have to have questions about what's the impact of what I sell online going to have on what I sell in store. Is it going to support it or is it going to cannibalize it? And what are you going to do which is going to make you different from the competition? If there's 100 people selling furniture online, what are you going to do that makes your furniture shop different? And then the last one is value. You know, the consumer will only keep shopping or will only start shopping with you if they feel that they're getting value for money. And it's not just about price, it's about quality, it's about service, it's about creating loyalty so that they feel like they can trust you and that they feel like yours is a website that they want to shop on.